I'm Brenda Penninx. I'm professor at the Department of Amsterdam UMC, connected to the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I actually have spent most of my working life in the field of depression and anxiety disorders, trying to understand better etiology, pathophysiology, but also the consequences of depression and anxiety disorder.
So for people that are new to this idea, immunometabolic depression, what is that? And how is it different from how we usually think about depression? And I think in your work, you said that maybe 20 or 30% of people with depression may have this. So who are these patients in practice?
Yeah, so the research line that we have on immunometabolic depression actually comes from the fact that depression is a very heterogeneous condition. And I think this is very clear from looking at large-scale cohort studies, like I'm leading one in the Netherlands called Netherlands Study of Depression and Anxiety. We basically see that there are lots of people with depression, but they really differ a lot in the symptom profiles, for instance, they experience. And depression in that sense is actually, I think, really more heterogeneous as compared to other types of mental disorders, although heterogeneity is not unique to depression. But think, for instance, about a patient that has depressed mood, but then has also high insomnia or really losing appetite, losing weight. That, I think, is a typical depressed patient. On the other hand, in clinical practice, you also have depressed patients that may not have clear, distinct sadness, but more anhedonia, so lost interest in things in life, and actually have hyperphagia. So these people are eating more, they're very fatigued, and they sleep more, take more naps, and are difficult to get out of bed. So that is a very different type of patient, but both qualify for the diagnosis of depression. And that is, I think, what we see in clinical practice, but that's also what we see in research. So we actually took that picture and asked the question, what are these different type of patient groups and what is the underlying pathophysiology, and is that different as well? And I think if we dive into this heterogeneity, in our research, and I think this is also confirmed by many different research lines these days we have, is that we see that specific pathophysiology is linked to specific symptom profiles. And that was the basis for our research. And what we see in a study like NESDA is that about 20 to 30% of the depressed population has evidence of inflammation, systemic low-grade inflammation, and metabolic abnormalities, especially in the lipid profile, and also high glucose levels. So these have dysregulations in the immune metabolic profile. And if you link them to the symptom profile that is more prevalent in people with these immune metabolic dysregulations, then we see it as a symptom profile of especially more the atypical energy-related symptoms, as we call it. So hyperphagia, hypersomnia, fatigue, leaden paralysis. So really more the energy-related spectrum of conditions where we really see the most clear link of immune metabolic dysregulation. So that brings the puzzle back to the profile that we now call immunometabolic depression, which is the combination of having evidence of immune metabolic dysregulations in combination with more of these atypical energy-related symptoms relevant for depression.
And do we know cause or consequence? Do we know whether inflammation and metabolic dysregulation are driving the depression or they're a side effect of the depression? And does that change how we would do things differently for patients?
There is not a cause and there is not a consequence. It's not so simple. I know from longitudinal studies, we know that immunometabolic dysregulations predicts the worsening and the onset of depression, but also depression itself can lead to further worsening of immune metabolic dysregulation. So the way I look at it is that there is a vicious cycle where mental health, and especially these atypical symptoms of depression, are really connected and stimulating, but also being caused by immunometabolic dysregulations. And I think that makes a lot of sense to consider it more as a vicious cycle because there are also common roots. So think about, for instance, genetics. We have seen in research that people can have a genetic vulnerability that actually can lead both, on one hand, to immunometabolic dysregulations, but also increase the risk of depression. So there may be common roots. Genetics is one, but you can also consider things like environmental aspects, unhealthy lifestyles, or childhood trauma in the past. These are environmental risk factors. On one hand, stimulating a higher increased risk of depression, but also stimulating immune metabolic dysregulation. So there is ample evidence in the literature that suggests that I think we really should look at this more as a vicious cycle with a common root coming from both genetics and environmental risks.
So what does it mean for treatment?
For me, it means we just have to break that vicious cycle. And I think what we need to do, and that's actually what I try to do in research, I try to break that cycle by, for instance, testing the role of anti-inflammatory drugs, but also testing lifestyle interventions. And I think, unfortunately, I'm not there yet to say this is how we best break this vicious cycle. But I think this is where various research lines are being focused on. And I think the importance of these treatment studies that are partly going on, we have first also seen some first results of specific treatment studies. I think the relevant target in these clinical treatment studies is that we need to really zoom in on potentially this subgroup of patients with immunometabolic depression, because there have been some anti-inflammatory drug treatment studies done, and they have not all been successful. But many of these have been targeting the entire depressed patient group. And in our expectation, I think it really makes sense to zoom in on the immunometabolic depressed subpopulation, because if there is no immune metabolic dysregulation to start with, targeting those systems will not likely yield positive or successful results, also not in improving mental health. And those studies did show a slightly lower chance of success for people with evidence of immunometabolic depression to be responsive to standard antidepressants.
Just a couple of months ago in JAMA Psychiatry, Ema Foley and Golam Kandakar in Bristol published this small proof of concept trial. And so it sounds a little bit like they are trying to do on a small scale what you were suggesting earlier, where they're targeting this population. I think it was 24 patients in their study. What did you think of this work?
I think it's really important work, first of all, because I think this study is one of the first to really target a specific subgroup of depressed patients. So this is really what I mentioned earlier. We really need to target the precise patient group for whom we believe these interventions may be beneficial. And what they do in their study is they actually do select people with some evidence of inflammation to target with an anti-IL-6 treatment option. And I think that is actually, like you mentioned, it is proof of concept. Yes, I think these are the studies that we really need. There are more of these studies going on, also some studies that are at a slightly larger scale. For instance, in our group, we have a study that we are currently analyzing where we also have explicitly targeted immunometabolic depressed patients. So we selected them on the basis of high levels of inflammation and the combination with atypical energy-related symptoms. And I know also for instance, in Belgium, in Antwerp, there is a big study going on as well. So some of these studies target specific subgroups and others don't, but they also use different interventions. So this proof of concept study is targeting directly IL-6. Others are more general anti-inflammatory agents that they are testing. So there's not only the question, what is then the best subgroup of patients to test, but also what is then the best intervention to give? And I think, this is not a very simple question, because multiple interventions that target inflammation or metabolic dysregulations are possible. And I think we just need a better evidence base to really start comparing these different interventions as well. I think it's good to mention that funded through the Wellcome Trust, there actually is a project going on. It's called the Aspire project, led by Carmine Pariante from KCL, that is actually bringing together the people that have been conducting these RCTs. So I think this is where we are at the moment. I think this whole field of immunometabolic depression, in my opinion, is relevant, but there are obviously some really relevant questions that we need to address before we can truly bring it to the clinic and even include, for instance, in clinical guidelines, recommendations on how to treat this subgroup. I didn't even talk about lifestyle interventions, which is another completely different field almost. But I do want to emphasize that I'm not only thinking that we can target immune metabolic dysregulation and these more atypical energy-related symptoms only by medication. I think we are not using lifestyle interventions enough in our clinical practice. And there is ample evidence that these lifestyle interventions, things like running therapy or maybe even nutritional interventions, they may be beneficial. And again, I would not be surprised if it is especially for this subgroup of immunometabolic depressed patients.
Supplement diet interventions is a huge commercial machine, and social media has made that particularly public facing in terms of advertising. I wonder what your sense is of how this field could develop and how we should protect the public from that kind of thing.
I think running therapy, for instance, needs to be considered as a true treatment. It's not the same as telling people go run. It's really helping them with it and offering support and offering it as a therapy, which can really stimulate them. And then yet we still see that some people don't want to start with these kind of interventions, or they really find it very difficult to adhere. So it's definitely not the miracle pill either. And I think that is also something, we have to be aware of. We have to monitor like we do with medication trials.
And presumably it's not just the metabolic impact of running that's the intervention. It's going to a group, getting support from people, behavioral activation. It is quite a complex intervention.
I completely agree. And that is part of why running therapy is successful, and we need to take it. I personally don't think it may only be through the metabolic routes that running is healthy for people. It's also for a lot of people, I think, a mindfulness moment, a moment indeed, if they do it together with others, to get socially connected, to be outside in an environment that can be pleasant. So I think there are many reasons, but if in the end this also creates and supports the response that running can have for patients, then I think, we should take it. And there is ample evidence that physical activation, and it does not only have to be through running, I think it can also be through other routes, is actually very good, not just for mental health, but also for metabolic health. So there are lots of studies on that as well. So even if it doesn't improve immediately mental health symptoms, then it is still something that is generally healthy for a person's body.
So it feels like we are on a journey from concept to clinic or from concept to implementation. And as you said, we're not there yet. What's missing, do you think, before a clinician can reliably say, you have an issue, immunometabolic depression, and here are the best evidence-based treatments? What are the top questions we need to answer?
How exactly do we select this subgroup of patients for whom interventions may be effective? What is the best intervention out of the whole array of treatment options we have to target immune and metabolic dysregulation? So I think that is still very much an open question. And that is partly also coming back to, still gaining understanding on exactly what are the different pathways that lead to immunometabolic dysregulation. For instance, the systemic inflammation that we see in depressed people can still come from different routes and pathways. And I think we're still not convinced enough yet whether people with high CRP levels, for instance, depressed people with high CRP levels, whether they all have one common immune pathway or whether there are different routes through which high CRP levels can arrive. And if the latter is the case, that would mean that maybe this is not a uniform enough group yet. So those, I think, are also questions that we need to better zoom in on by doing better, in this case, for instance, immune profiling at a large scale of this subgroup. So I think that's also something that we at least want to still contribute to. that in the end, hopefully can also help solving the question, what are then the best interventions that we actually need to give people?
I really like your work and this field because it kind of reinforces and supports this belief that I've always had that the only way you can separate the mind from the body is with an axe. That isn't something which is well understood throughout culture, throughout society. Do you think there are cultural barriers that we will need to overcome before our health systems can deliver this kind of care?
Yeah, I think we need to bring mental health care and somatic health care closer together. And I think this is a typical situation. I sometimes feel that mental health care has drifted a little bit too far away from somatic health care. If I just look in the Netherlands, I know a lot of mental health care organizations outside of hospitals are not well connected with somatic health care. And vice versa. In somatic healthcare settings, there's not enough attention for mental health care aspects. So I really wish for the future that we bring back mental and somatic healthcare systems closer together and that we consider collaborative care where we zoom in on both mental and somatic healthcare aspects much more as a design that fits and is central in our healthcare system. And I think there are some things to do in that aspect still.
And then just focusing lastly on the BAP conference and the talk that you're going to give, why should people at the conference come and hear you talk?
I hope it really can stimulate other scientists also to contribute to this precision psychiatry focus, which I think is really necessary to deal with the heterogeneity of our patient population and hopefully also improve mental health care so that we can treat patients better with the right treatment that fits with their symptom and pathophysiology profile.